Some of you might have noticed a few days ago, I think the end of last week, there was an op-ed piece on the Times on meditation. One or two of you pointed it out to me. It was called, "Can We End the Meditation Madness?" And the point of the writer, I think his name was Adam Grant, he was saying, stop laying a guilt trip on me because I don't meditate. It's become so, so current, so cool, to meditate. Everybody's meditating, in the boardrooms, in the corporations, military bases, everywhere, everybody's meditating. And he was saying, look, if you want to go for stress reduction and these other benefits, physical, psychological benefits, you can get it from other things than meditation. Exercise, lots of other methods are good for those things. So leave me alone. And I thought it was fantastic. It was very, very salutary to have that reminder and that wake up, that caution, if you will, about meditation, mindfulness. I immediately sent it to a good friend of mine, Lama Surya Das, a Tibetan Lama, who has also written about the secularization of meditation, this popularization of meditation, or mindfulness, sometimes called. At a dinner with Roshi Kennedy the other night, and I called it Zen light. He thought that was a good expression. And I work with the Global Peace Initiative of Women, and the founder of that, Dina Miriam, also points that out frequently, that this meditation practice has been divorced from its roots in religious and spiritual traditions, and then what does it become? And it's a very valid concern. In fact, in one of the foundational books of American Zen, one of the classics called The Three Pillars of Zen, you might know that by Philip Kapleau. A lot of it is, sermons or teishos and instruction by Yasutani Roshi, one of the great Japanese masters who was helping in the West. And towards the beginning of that book, Yasutani Roshi lists the 5 levels of Zen. 5. And the first level is exactly what we're talking about, and what the op-ed piece was about. What he calls Banpu Zen, which in, I guess, Japanese means ordinary Zen, popular Zen, superficial Zen. And he says, this is not great stuff. This is for stress. People come to it because they want relief from this or that, and they're looking for some relaxation and stress reduction. He says, okay, but it's not Zen. It's Banpu Zen. It's popularized Zen. And he ends by saying, this does not answer the question of who you are, which is what Zen and any valid spiritual practice is really about. It leaves unanswered the question of who you really are in relation to the whole universe. In particular, he concludes, it leaves you with the delusion that you're separate. And you're separate from the universe and from everything, which is fundamental illusion and delusion. And that won't be addressed by this. So that's worth considering. And that's also why I said a moment ago, I startled you by saying during the Kinhin, who's walking? Who's moving? Because who are you in relation to everyone and everything else? Are you separate? Is it just you walking? And if it is, well, you're not awake. So you say, well, it sounds a little abstract, and it sounds very Buddhist. Well, yeah, okay, but it's the fundamental insight. So what I want to do is I want to address some of the non-separate presentations of human existence that are found in a very recent book by a wonderful Franciscan. Here we are in St. Francis, a church. Ilia de Leo, a Franciscan nun who's great theologian, written a number of wonderful books, and this is called The Unbearable Wholeness of Being. What's the name of that movie? The Unbearable Lightness of Being? Anyway, this is The Unbearable Wholeness of Being. God, evolution, and the power of love. And here you have, from a Westerner, a presentation of, some aspects of who we are in a way that sounds very much like what Buddhism's been saying 2,500 years. For example, we're talking about evolutionary, so evolution, and this is very much cross-cultural now and cross-spirituality, very, very much. I work with the Global Peace Initiative of Women. They're very much into this now. A global evolutionary spirituality and a global evolutionary consciousness is where we're going. That's what evolution is taking us to become aware of itself, and we're part of it. But it's a whole. So she says, in this point, a broad set of principles and patterns that generates novelty, change, development. The interplay of forces creates a dynamic process of unfolding life, pointing to the fact that nature is incomplete. There are no fixed essences. Uh-oh, wow, really? All of Western philosophy just went down the tubes. There are no fixed essences. Plato and Aristotle, bye. No fixed essences. St. Thomas, no fixed essences, including you, by the way. We'll come to that in a second, including us. So what that means is there's perpetual change, in science, it shows this, physics and biology and everything. There's a constant change, and nothing is stable. This is the Buddhist doctrine of impermanence, that everything is changed, everything is moving. There's no fixed essence. There's no thing. There's no substance that keeps you locked into a particular way of being or of consciousness. This is what the Buddha saw from the beginning, and now we're just waking up to it, in the West with thought like this. So there are no fixed essences. A tree or a horse, they're all sort of interrelated patterns of energy that interbecome, interbeing. Well, on the very next page, she addresses, us, he says. So the human person is not the great exception to evolution, but rather its recapitulation. Okay? Teilhard de Chardin is very much into this view too. So, what the ancients called the soul, or the core of personhood, emerges through a process of centrogenesis. What? Through a process of centrogenesis. So there's a centralization of energy, a movement towards centralization, whereby convergence and complexity give rise to greater consciousness. Right, that's pure Teilhard de Chardin's book about complexity consciousness and the evolutionary process. Where there's a centralization of energy, a centering of energy, centering prayer, centering of energy, and it becomes more complex and more conscious at the same time. Complexity consciousness, is called. So that's what we're experiencing as ourselves. That's it. So there's a complexity, convergence, consciousness to form us, but there aren't any fixed essences either. So if you imagine yourself, I'm the soul, or I have a soul, and I'm a separate soul, and my soul's going to be saved in hell with everybody else, sorry, that's not the way it works. You're an emanation of energy, and you're connected to every other thing, and you're moving towards, well, Taylor said the Omega point, Christ, Buddha. You're already there, you just have to wake up to it. So all this kind of thing. So you're in fluidity too. Not just your body, but quotes, your soul. Right? It's just a centralization of energy. So it's not a fixed thing. Your identity, your soul, your being, your consciousness are not fixed things. It's a wondrous process of movement. So again, we're waking up to that through evolutionary theology. It's the same thing the Buddha saw 2,500 years ago. So she says later, talking about God being absolutized is out there and making fixed structures. She says religion degenerates. This is the conclusion of one of the chapters. Religion degenerates into religiosity, which is bad in case you didn't know. When God is absolutized by constructing foundations that are purported to be immutable. So much of our talk about religion and faith, not just in Christianity, but across the board, is about this cannot be changed. This is absolutely immutable. This is forever. Well, better be careful. What is? It's easy to make idols out of things that way. When fixed structures cannot adapt to changing circumstances. Excessive order, paradoxically, drifts toward chaos, in case you haven't noticed. So what's happening to religions in the world, which unexpectedly creates the conditions for the creative emergence of new patterns of order. The livingness of God, absolute energy, emptiness, in Buddhist terms, disrupts and disfigures every stabilizing structure, keeps things moving and evolving, thereby keeping the playful whole in movement. So it's a positive thing. Even though it's scary, because you can't hold on to anything, and especially yourselves. It's an unbearable wholeness of being. Wholeness is everywhere, as we'll see in a second even more clearly. But it's unbearable because, the ego wants to be stable, wants to hold on, and wants to grasp and cling, which is the source of suffering, which is what the Buddha said 2,500 years ago. Right? So the playful whole is in movement. Just when we think we have a certainty of God, dangerous. Divinity will slip out from under our evolutionary feet, like the speed of light, elude our grasp, to become for us the power of the future. This lady's a powerhouse, huh? This is great stuff. So more about, interrelation of God and the cosmos, how everything's a wholeness and they're related to everything else. Buddhism says, at the Heart Sutra, emptiness is form and form is emptiness. You can never have the absolute without the relative or the relative without the absolute. They always come. They're always there together. Well, okay. Well, this is what she has to say about that. And she's quoting, Panikar, Raymond Panikar, who you might know is a Hindu Catholic priest who died a few years ago. She says, the subject matter of the new cosmos story is neither the cosmos nor the human, but the cosmos inhabited by God and human, who is a constitutive member of reality. Now she's quoting Panikar. The very name of God is a cosmological notion. Now let that sink in. The very name of God is a cosmological notion. Theology without cosmology is a mere abstraction of a non-existing God. And a cosmology without theology is just a mirage. So you can't just have a cosmology without the deeper foundational thing, the force of evolution behind it, as God is there. But you can't have God without the cosmos either. As if God is some being outside or up there who was waiting for a long time and then finally decided to create, and he directs things from above, and all that is sheer illusion, sheer projection. Emptiness is form, and form is emptiness. You can't have one without the other. And it's a love story, as she says. And Teilhard says, religion is born of the earth's need for the disclosing of a God. So religion comes right out of the cosmos's need, for becoming aware of the driving force from beneath, from within, and from the future too, as Teilhard would say. So religion belongs fundamentally to the cosmos, not to the human person alone. There's no cosmos without God and no God without cosmos, as I just said. Divine, she says, is never alone or by itself. This is Panikar also. No, Teilhard, sorry. The divine is never alone or by itself because it has no self. So that's the first problem about projecting God out there as some being, because it's some self, which God doesn't have. God is not a separate self. It is a dimension of the whole. And she says, it is amazing how some of the most educated people still think of God as a prime mover or as an apathetic deity who watches us from a distance. A concept of God that can be rejected, such as prime mover, is a concept empty of God. God is not an idea, but the living wholeness of reality. Buddha nature, Christ nature. God is not an idea, but the living wholeness of reality, seen not by the physical eye of the scientist, but by the gaze of the mystic, the inner eye of love. And she quotes Paul Tillich, who was no slouch, a great Protestant theologian of the 20th century. He says, a God whose existence or non-existence you can argue is a thing beside others within the universe of existing things. And he says, that's bound for atheism. Takes the first step on the road which inescapably leads to what is called atheism. Theologians who make of God a highest being up there who has given some people information about himself provoke inescapably the resistance of those who are told they must subject themselves to the authority of this information. Well, that takes us in yet another direction. But it's really important to realize God is not a timeless being without relation to anything in time, nor is God apathetic to the fate of the cosmos. God belongs to the cosmos. And when this relationship is aborted, theology becomes a mere abstraction of a non-existent God. So that's why so many times people say, well, I don't believe in God. And when people say, well, I believe in a God who's up there, apart from everything, and created the world and commanded the world, and is doing things or not doing things, and why isn't God? Of course that leads to atheism, because such a God is an illusion. If that's who God is, I'm an atheist. But that's not who God is. God is infinite being, St. Thomas did say. And finally, in case you're not uncomfortable enough already, it's unbearable, isn't it? The wholeness of being. The holon, this is the best part, I think. Holons of holarchy, H-O-L-O-N, holon and holarchy. That's supposed to hierarchy with everybody having, distinct, separate being and function and authority to each other. The holarchy is that everything reflects everything. You're a whole and a part. Like a hologram. Any particular thing is a hologram of everything, contains everything. Even modern science, proposes this. So the same with you. You, who's walking, who's moving, are everyone. And everything at the same time. You're a part, you're the form, but you're the absolute at the same time. It's right there. You can't separate it out. And you're everybody and everything. There's only one Christ, there's only one Buddha. And there's no separation between you and God, or you and the absolute, and you and anybody else. It's a whole argument. You're a whole and a part. And the part is in the whole, and the whole is in the part. Every one. Which is what Buddhism has been telling us for thousands of years. One of my favorite images for this is Manjusri, the great bodhisattva of wisdom, with his sword. He's riding on a golden lion, a golden-haired lion, which is a symbol of reality itself. And the golden-haired lion, each strand of hair is golden. So every individual relative thing is golden, but every golden hair reflects every other golden hair. So they're holons. They're holograms. Everything reflects everything and is everything. Expressed in an image or a symbol. Another way to use, borrowed from Hinduism, that comes up a lot, the jeweled net of Indra. Indra's net is the whole of reality. Everything is interconnected, everything is a network, everything is a net, everything is interconnected, and at every point is a jewel, and every jewel reflects every other jewel, and contains every other jewel. So you're a jewel on Indra's net that reflects every other jewel, and the jewel, there's only one jewel, which is the absolute as well, when you're reflecting that, and it's in you, and you're in it. Only one Christ, loving himself. So all this is right here in modern Catholic theology. Here. But I'm going to conclude by, since that sounds all very theological, how does it feel when this happens? What do you wake up to? So I'm going to honor today's Saint Teresa of Jesus. And not only that, it's a formal conclusion of the Teresian year. This 1515 is the birth year of St. Teresa, and so this is our 500th anniversary of St. Teresa. I gave a homily this morning at Mass about her. But I thought I'd take part of the Las Moradas, the Interior Castle, Book 5, in which he talks about the prayer of union, one of the levels of prayer, and he speaks about it in terms of what it feels like, conscious, what happens to the faculties. She says, and you can experience this on your Mass. But she speaks about the prayer of union in terms of the faculties being all in union, so that your mind isn't thinking and can't think. Your imagination isn't imagining and can't. Your will is captive, and you're just held. You're completely absorbed. Are you relative or absolute anymore? You're disconnected. Not disconnected, you're just connected. So, she says, in paragraph 4 of chapter 1 of her book 5. So, it's not a dreamy state, she says. Soul isn't asleep. But there's no need to use any technique to suspend the mind, since all the faculties are asleep, in this deeper sense, in this state, and truly asleep to the things of the world and to ourselves. So no ego here. As a matter of fact, during the time that the union lasts, the soul is left as though without its senses. It has no power to think, even if it wants to. Have you ever experienced that? It's called ligature in Catholic theology. In loving, if it does love, it doesn't understand how or what it is it loves or what it would want. It's just loving. In some, it is like one who in every respect has died to the world, died to your ego, died to your false self, so as to live more completely to God. Thus the death is a delightful one. An uprooting of all the operations the soul can have while being in the body. The death is a delightful one because in truth it seems that in order to dwell more perfectly in God, the soul is separated from the body. But I don't even know if it has life enough to breathe. And then in parentheses, I was just now thinking about this, and it seems to me that it doesn't breathe. At least if it does breathe, it's unaware of doing so. You ever experienced that? That can happen on your mat. So it's stunned. Even if consciousness is not completely lost, neither a hand nor a foot stirs, it's as if we were dead. And then she goes on, oh, secrets of God, I can never tire of explaining them. It's just so wonderful. This is where she really gets excited. And a few paragraphs later, she uses the most famous image comparison in all her work. And this union that she just describes corresponds to the fourth water, if you're familiar with the book on her life. But the most famous image of all is the image of the silkworm coming out of the cocoon and becoming a butterfly. And that's what she says happens at this level of consciousness, union, everything. Is that it's like the worm becomes a butterfly. So radical is the change. So unbearable for the ego that the wholeness just completely overtakes you and you become somebody you never even knew you could possibly be. That's what she said. That's exactly what the experience is like. Wow, this is who I am? I never guessed. I never could possibly have imagined. How fantastic. Union with everything, beyond everything I could ever imagine. The wholeness of being, how deliciously unbearable. And it does answer the question that Yasutani posed. Who are you really in relation to the whole universe? And have you overcome the delusion of being somebody separate? That's why we sit. So please, save us from the meditation madness, from Zen light, and let's get into something with a little more guts.